Abena is a name given to girls born on a Tuesday. Mika and Lawa are two of the other main characters in the book, or they're not main characters, but they're two other characters who are Mozambican in the book, and they're traditional Mozambican names as well. And Ferdinand, her father, is a carryover from Portuguese days. A lot of the children there still have Portuguese names. And the American characters are just wild names I came up with because I didn't want to pick anybody I knew. Kupela. Kupela is also, yeah, it's a tribal name.
What's the best advice you could give for a writer rather than trial and error and being rejected by your favorite writer?
Sure.
What's your best little snippet?
My best snippet of advice is I think publishing is going the same way as newspapers, as much as it breaks my heart to say that. I think that a lot of, I grew up going to libraries and going to bookstores like changing hands, and the first thing I would do is I'd pick up a book and I'd put it to my nose. Because how great is the smell of an old book, Like, they could bottle that smell, I wouldn't wear it, but I would have it around in my house somewhere. But I would say that persevere. I think self-publishing is really taking off. I think the technology is getting better every single day, and the ability to publish both ebooks and print books is becoming less and less expensive. So, I read a review this week in the New York Times about how great that is, and yet now you're taking away the filter of the traditional publishing house, so a lot of crap is also being published. So it takes a discerning eye, right? I think books are just like any other form of art. You like what you like. Sometimes you can't explain it, sometimes you can. Sometimes everybody likes it, sometimes nobody likes it. It just is what it is. So I would say my one piece of advice is if you have something you want to publish, persevere, do it. JT.
So the book has changed, I gather, substantially since your first draft. Have you gone back to read the first draft now that you have the finished work?
I haven't. I should.
How do you like the finished work?
Okay, that's a great question. I feel like reading the first 100 pages, I'm 23 years old and I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm beating people over the head in my life with, this is how awful Africa is, and pay attention and do something about it and give money to charity, and people are dying and somebody pay attention. And then at about page 112, I kind of hit a stride. And it's like, okay, people here care. People here don't always know necessarily what to do. I feel like Africa's a lot like global warming. We all know that there's a problem and we don't all necessarily know what to do about it, and so it's just something that's in the back of our mind. There's a lot of parts of this book that I'm very, very proud of, and there's some that I cringe when I read it because I wish that I could change a little bit. But the ending is, I think the ending is spot on. I'm very proud of it.
I may already know the answer to this question, but I want to know what is the first thing you bought or did for yourself to celebrate when you had the first copy in your hands.
Probably a bottle of wine.
Or 3.
I don't think I bought anything huge. No, I didn't. No. It's time. Yeah. Hopefully I'll be buying a ticket to Africa. I hope to spend the holidays with Matt's family in Malawi and Zimbabwe, so that'll be a pretty big expense. Yes, Mike?
Do you have another one in the works?
I do. Basket Baby, which I'll give you the premise of Basket Baby. It is called Basket Baby because when I was working in Bolivia, I worked really closely with an American priest who, everybody in Bolivia called him Miguel Donawe, but his name was Michael Donahue. So Padre Donawe and I did a lot of work together, and he was from Boston, and he had this really thick Boston, drawl to him. And he would tell me that on Fridays in the major cities in Bolivia, the wealthy parts of town often have baskets delivered to their front door, and the baskets have babies in them. And the babies come from rural communities. They're babies that are born either because they have a malformation or they're born to incest, or for some reason the family can't keep the baby. So they take their baby and they wrap it up in the very best blanket they can find, and they put it in the very best blanket or the basket they can find, and they usually pin a little note to its blanket. And they'll leave it at the home of a fancy house in Bolivia on a Friday afternoon because all the social services close at noon, and they don't open back up until Monday mid-morning. So the idea is the family has to bond with that baby by the time Monday rolls around, and that baby will have a much better life with a wealthy family. So I'm writing a story about an American couple who has just lost a baby, and for one reason or another they end up in Bolivia, and She walks out her front door one day and stumbles over a baby. Now what do you do? Papa.
If you had to do it over again and it just graduated, would you do it again?
I assume you're speaking of the Peace Corps? Is that what you're talking about? Or
The rest of,
the rest of
from then until now?
Yeah. No, I think my mom and I were actually just talking about this today. The only thing I would change, if I could go back and change, would be that I raced through NAU because I knew I wanted to be a Peace Corps volunteer from a very young age. And so I never went to the bars. I never had like the traditional college. I never had like the traditional college experience. I graduated when I was 20, so according to my mother, I never went to the bars.
Yeah. All right.
Which isn't really the point to stay in school an extra year, but I wish that I hadn't been so high-strung and pressured to be this specific person and go to this very specific thing, because the truth is, when I got there, I wasn't prepared. I wasn't prepared emotionally to deal with that situation. And I think I would have been much more prepared if I had gone a few years later. And so I went and I came back very quickly, and it was the first thing I had ever wildly failed at. And people will tell me I didn't fail at it, but I didn't keep the commitment that I signed up for. And so it's still something that, if you talk to other Peace Corps volunteers who've completed their service, they'll say, oh, you ET'd, which means you early terminated, and it's kind of a stigma. And so this is being marketed as a former Peace Corps volunteer book, but I don't, in groups of Peace Corps volunteers, I don't talk about my experience because most of them lasted 2 years and I didn't. So that's the one thing I would have changed. I would have taken the extra time in college. I would have probably worked for a year and then gone. So I had been a little more mature and a little more able to handle being away from my family for such an extended period of time, and being able to look at the average Cameroonian man and telling him to get his hands off of me and leave me alone. So it was a tricky time of life. Lynn.
Were there other writers or works that have influenced you?
Yeah. Well, my two favorite authors by far are, again, Barbara Kingsolver and Gabrielle Garcia Marquez. I will tell you, like, the beauty of being in the Peace Corps, another wonderful aspect was we had these homes that all the Peace Corps volunteers paid monthly rent for, so you could go to them and you could stay overnight, and each of the homes in the different cities had a library. And so as Peace Corps volunteers came and went, they always left the books that they brought with them to the country. So the libraries in these houses were unbelievable, and I hadn't had that kind of time to read. And so I was reading a book every other day or so. So I read all of Gabrielle Garcia Marquez's stuff, and a whole bunch of other authors that are really fond of my heart because I read them during that time period. But I would say my most current author who I adore, and I think his works are so funny and creative, is Brady Udall, who is, I don't know that he's necessarily local, but he's from the desert Southwest. He wrote The Miracle Life of Edgar Mint, which if you haven't read, you should read because it's one of the funniest books you'll ever read. And he just published The Lonely Polygamist, which is also great. Yes?
What was the process when you self-published, and what is your marketing beyond Olive here?
Right,
What's
great
the
question.
trends?
Sure. So I am a very spiritual person, and I believe in grace. And I will tell you that I was so frustrated. I had sent out